Welcome to Hollywood Smoke in the city of Santa Monica. I'm Steve Kim for UCN Live, and welcome to another edition of 10 Count, joined by Doug Fischer of Ring TV, and from UCN, and also Ring, Michael Baca. Gentlemen, this past Saturday at the O2 Arena in London, England, it was Gennady Golovkin successfully defending his middleweight title by stopping Kell Brook in 5. Doug, I'll go to you first. Was this exactly what we expected? Should the result really not surprise anybody?
Yeah, the way it was stopped with Dominic Ingle throwing in the towel, I didn't expect that. That was unexpected and a little bit anticlimactic. But Golovkin winning by stoppage, yeah. I mean,
First half of the fight
I think
also.
very few people predicted that Kell Brook could go 12 rounds. Some of us who hold him in very high regards, myself included, said that he could make it into the late rounds. And if he did so, it would be a punishing fight. But a lot of us who said that also said that he would have his moments, that he has the type of talent, he has the type of athleticism and boxing skill to where he can slip punches and come back very hard, the kind of punches that would hurt or drop a welterweight. And he did. He had his moments. He had a very good round, too. But what happened in round 5 was going to ultimately happen. If Ingle didn't throw in the towel in round 5, he probably would have kept Kell on his stool after round 5 or after round 6 if Kell was tough enough to take that beating.
Yeah, here's what I thought. Going into this fight, I don't know if this was a lose-lose situation for Golovkin given the circumstances. We knew what everyone said, Mike. But in many ways, it was a no-win situation for Golovkin, was it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all agreed, right, before the fight. It's actually part of the reason why I didn't really warm up to the fight leading up to it. I think I said it on this show here. Reason being, I knew who was going to win the whole time. And Golovkin, like he said afterward, Brook is not a middleweight. He's a welterweight. He's in the wrong division. And clearly we saw that. The first round, when Golovkin hurt him with that body shot, hadn't Brook tie him up and get some time to regain himself, I think the fight could have ended there. And quite frankly, going into the second round, the way Golovkin fought, I felt like he kind of carried Brook. I wonder if you agree with me.
Interesting.
I mean, it's pure speculation here. Carried him.
Or maybe was purposely reckless to get him to open up a little bit more to come back.
When you carry a guy, you don't really hit him that much. You ease off on the pressure.
Yeah, and it looked like Golovkin was swinging pretty hard.
Yeah, I thought he became technically unhinged. And I've always said that when Golovkin doesn't really respect your punching power, I think his amateur pedigree goes right out the window. He does become, as he describes himself, a street fighter.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you mentioned him coming unhinged, Doug.
Yeah.
I've never seen Golovkin so wild, ever, or out.
He seemed rushed.
Yes.
To me.
That's part of the reason why I felt like he was, carrying him, knowing Brook's not going to hurt him. He can go for it. And he was headhunting after the first round, which was kind of mind-boggling to me. He's a great body puncher, and he just left it after the first round.
He's also got a great jab, which he didn't really use as effectively as we're used to seeing him. But I want to say this: we have to give Kell Brook credit for the punches that he landed.
Sure.
Yes, he was facing a somewhat reckless version of Triple G, but a lot of guys wouldn't have done what Kell Brook was able to do with in the first 3 rounds against Golovkin, and I think that speaks to Kell Brook's his talent.
They may have missed a knockdown in the second, but officially he never hit the floor. And in fact, there was one right hand, I believe in the 4th or 5th, that I've seen buckle guys and send them down. Brook showed a middleweight chin, though. I think there's a certain durability to him. Kell Brook in defeat, I think his stock rises. I'd love to see him at 54 with the Charlos, Julian Williams, Demetrius Andrade. We'll see what happens there. As it relates to Golovkin, I found it fascinating, the storyline the last 36 hours prior to the fight, was that Golovkin was not only weight drained and emaciated, he was on his deathbed. And I think Tom
He had
Loeffler,
malaria.
Yeah, and malaria. And
he had the Ebola virus.
I was told that Benny Hinn had to come in and touch Golovkin on his forehead, and then he walked out to the ring heroically like Willis Reed.
Right.
Wow, what courage.
He was deathly ill. You had a lot of that speculation, and which also fed to a lot of. I received a lot of tweets where folks were saying, I have a feeling about this fight. Something crazy is going to happen. Brook is really live. He's more than live in this fight.
Did you check those IP addresses? Were they from Britain?
You know what? It happens before certain Triple G fights. It happened before Triple G faced punchers like David Lemieux and Curtis Stevens. People were thinking, like, you know what? This guy gets hit, and he does get hit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you're a pressure fighter and you're an offense-minded fighter and you are going for the stoppage, you do want to extend your KO streak to 20 in a row, 21 in a row, 22 in a row, 23 in a row. You're going to get hit in the process. So given that fact, people are saying, well, sooner or later, someone's going to hit this guy and he's going to become discombobulated. He's going to get dropped. He's going to get hurt. The tide's going to turn. It hasn't happened yet, but there were people thinking, okay, it's going to happen against Kell Brook because he's sick. The combination of Brook being stronger at middleweight than people expect, and Golovkin being more than under the weather, being actually sick, the flu, whatever people thought that he had, that's going to combine to give us some kind of crazy, shocking moment. Obviously, it didn't happen.
You know, in texting with Jim Lampley that Friday, I asked him, you were there. And he spent a lot of time together at the fighter meetings. And he said, Steve, I didn't see anything wrong with them. What I was told by multiple sources, and I don't know how Golovkin lives in LA if this is the case, he was actually annoyed by the London traffic. Gennady, don't ever take the 405 here, okay? That's all I'm going to say, because you're going to be annoyed a lot. Now, is it different, though, traveling? Yes, and I think that for the first time in a very long time, he was not the crowd favorite, and I think that plays a role, and certainly the judging. Mike, I'm stunned, sort of, but Golovkin was actually losing that fight on one scorecard. Benoit Rousseau had him losing 3 out of the first 4 rounds, and the other 2 judges had it 38-38. To me, that's home cooking.
Absolutely.
I honestly didn't know that until you told me earlier today, which is, you know, unfortunately, it's not that surprising considering we're in a sport
as usual.
Is boxing, yeah. But, I mean, it goes to show how important stopping guys are. And Golovkin does that. His 23rd knockout in a row, leaves no questions unanswered.
Mm-hmm. If you look at the landscape in the middleweight division, I think it is so predictable that as soon as Golovkin loses a round or two, that E word that you love, Doug, exposed.
I haven't heard exposed in such a long time. It used to happen with prospects who were sort of unproven. And they run into their first real test or a tough gatekeeper. They lose. They're exposed. You guys in the media hyped him up. But it's so strange to hear it against not a prospect, but a unified champion, a guy who has 3 major belts, a guy who is defended the titles more than almost everybody except for, you know, Marvin Hagler and Bernard Hopkins or Carlos Monzon, or he's in that range of his title defenses, and who's had this much success as a world-class contender and title holder, and he wins. He didn't lose. He won the fight, maybe lost 1 round, maybe lost 2, and he's exposed, because we heard it after the Willie Monroe fight, right? So a guy stands in there with him, lands some punches, maybe wins a round. Golovkin's exposed. It's like, okay, Triple G has his haters out there. He has detractors where it's like, and I get the emails. I get people on my timeline. I don't block people as much as you do, Steve. Maybe I should.
Does anybody, really?
But they say, you know what, they actually asked this. And somebody asked it in the mailbag. And I have a couple other emails that I didn't even use where people are saying, has Golovkin really faced a world-class middleweight? And I'm thinking, why do you think he's ranked consensus number 1? Why do you think us in the media have him pound for pound and rank him number 1 at middleweight? Because we think he's cute?
With this.
I mean, like, honestly, it's like, no, I mean, okay, I'll put it this way. The guys that he's defeated, they're avoided. I'm saying, guys, you may not think David Lemieux or Curtis Stevens are legit elite middleweights or top 10 contenders, which is crazy because Lemieux was a title holder and Curtis Stevens had definitely earned a top 10 ranking before he fought Golovkin. Those guys are avoided. Nobody wants to fight Lemieux or Curtis Stevens, let alone get in there with Gennady Golovkin. And I'm not arguing with these people. What I'm going to say is, if you think he was exposed by a welterweight, and you think he has no defense, if you think he's slow as molasses, if you think he's flat-footed and plotting, convince Daniel Jacobs, convince Canelo Alvarez, convince Billy Joe Saunders. Convince them. You've convinced yourself that he's completely overrated. Go and convince the so-called other top middleweights to get in there and really expose him by beating him.
What's really interesting to me is when Sergio Martinez is eking past Martin Murray, getting knocked down and being neck and neck with Matthew Macklin for about 8-9 rounds, nobody was actually using the E word on Sergio Martinez. There seems to be this double standard. The question is, do you think, guys, that with Golovkin perhaps losing a round or two, and I certainly thought he lost the second.
Me too.
That guys, like, remember, the famous line from Max Schmeling when he looked at Joe Louis early on, he says, I see something. Do you think these guys, honestly, do you think they see something?
They're all saying they see something. See, the thing about Schmeling is, he said, I see something after he signed the contract.
Right.
See, that's how it goes. Yeah. You signed the contract to fight him. You don't talk about it and tweet about it. You talk about it and then you be about it.
Yeah.
You walk the walk. Everyone's talking the talk. And in which case, people, listen, give Canelo lots of hell. Give him hell on social media. But if you're a fighter, if you're a middleweight, and you haven't signed the dotted line to fight Gennady Golovkin, I don't think you have a right to give Canelo hell. I think the fighters that can give Canelo hell, give him crap, Kell Brook.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
David Lemieux. You know what I mean? The guys who got in there, and fun, the guys who had options and said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and take this challenge. Those are the guys who can talk that crap. I've seen a lot of brave tweets out there from fighters and from their trainers who said they can beat them. Like, don't talk about it, be about them. Or talk about it and then talk to your manager or your promoter to talk to Tom Loeffler.
There's been a trend from Sergio Martinez to Miguel Cotto and I guess to Canelo, who's on the clock. Okay.
Yep. Absolutely.
There's been guys that have said Golovkin does not fit the risk versus reward ratio. Now, with that said, Michael, the WBA has made it very clear, and the Honorable Gilberto Mendoza Jr. has said the negotiation period starts now. Okay, and if they don't meet the 30-day window, then it goes to a purse bid. Mike, here's my greatest fear, okay, being the hard-boiled cynic that I've become in my later years. Is this Stevenson-Kovalev redo?
I was just going to bring that up. How, if Jacob's side puts up more money in the purse bid, Golovkin's HBO contract stops him from fighting on any other network, right?
Yeah.
We're in kind of a conundrum here. Does that force Golovkin into vacating the belt, the WBA belt? Right, obviously, yes.
And their
I don't think
tagline
he wants
has
to
been
do that.
all the belts. And honestly, BJ Saunders may have the last remaining belt, but as an American fight fan, and given the fact Daniel Jacobs has been on our radar for at least 5-6 years, he's now a staple on various cable networks, we know who he is.
Right.
That's the fight I want to see more than BJ Saunders.
And he's been able to sell in Brooklyn, fighting at Barclays Center. He doesn't sell the joint out. He's not Triple G in that regard. But in his home region, I think he is an attraction. And I'm not talking about the Sergio Mora rematch victory, but he's still coming off an impressive stoppage of Peter Quillen. In stopping Peter Quillen, he beat a top 5 or at least a legit top 10 middleweight contender. And he did so in impressive fashion, and that makes him an elite 160-pounder. And based on what people saw or perceive with the Kell Brook fight, they believe somebody with speed, reflexes, good coordination,
Natural
good lateral
middleweight.
movement. If they can do what Brook did, but just be bigger, be a natural man. That's what Jacobs is. Jacobs was a middleweight as an amateur. Jacobs was fighting at 165 pounds as an amateur. Jacobs turned pro, mainly fighting at super middleweight, and didn't get down to 160 until titles were on the line. So obviously, he's a real middleweight. He rehydrates. He's a big, light heavyweight size guy come fight time. And he has speed, and he has power, and he knows how to box, okay? So, yeah, obviously, this is a fight that people would get excited about, more so than with Billy Joe Saunders, who's mainly known in the UK. And from what hardcore American fight fans know about Billy Saunders here is that he tweets a lot of crap and he doesn't fight.
You mean baffling Joe Saunders?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, anyone
Pulls out of fights,
right?
or-
He does.
or
Listen,
refuses to fight.
Forget not fighting Golovkin. I kind of understand it. Again,
Yes.
risk versus reward. But when you are offered a 2-fight deal by Golden Boy, where you have to beat Gabe Rosado, not Willie the Worm Monroe Sr. or Benny Briscoe, to get to Canelo, and you turn that deal down, I don't want to hear or get any more emails that Loeffler can't close, that this is somehow on them. I always thought that was bizarre. The other issue is I hear this a lot. Well, why isn't Golovkin moving up? Doesn't have to. Business is still good. And I've always said another double standard. Did anyone ever force Marvin Hagler or Bernard Hopkins to move up until they made some money against marquee names coming up in weight? And again, why should the guy who's willing to make the weight and is still the biggest name in the division, why is Golovkin being forced up by anybody? I just find that to be, again, a little bit strange. That why? Because at 168, what fight is there?
And yeah,
are
exactly.
you sure that's a
That's
super
my
fight?
thing, is who's he going to fight at 168 that's going to be a huge fight? There are some decent fighters out there. I like James DeGale. I think Badou Jack has improved every fight.
Gilberto Ramirez.
I like Ramirez, and Ramirez has talked about Golovkin, although he's done one of these numbers where it's like, I want to fight Golovkin, but not my next fight. You know, sometime in 2017, and that's great. That's a fight that Loeffler and Team Golovkin say that they would be interested in. With DeGale and Jack, they are sort of verbally committed to fighting each other.
Yeah.
They've got kind of a deal going with Showtime. And I actually think that fight needs to happen because that fight settles who is the best 168-pounder. The winner of that fight will be Ring Magazine's super middleweight champion. And that makes an eventual showdown with Gennady Golovkin that much bigger. Golovkin stepping up in weight to fight the best 168-pounder for a unified Ring Magazine super middleweight championship.
That's maddening is you're forcing Golovkin to move up because other guys won't fight him. You're penalizing the guy trying to make the fight. I don't, and guess what? If you don't like these fights, don't watch it. The business will move on with or without you. It's certainly your prerogative. Mike, I found it interesting that in a story on Boxing Scene last week, prior to the rematch with Sergio Mora in Reading, Pennsylvania, that Danny Jacobs brought up race as an issue as to why he's not more popular, why he's not getting this. Without pointing fingers, you can understand one thing. 3 of them come right back at you. He's the one who took the layoff. And there's a guy by the name of Al Heyman who is not Whitey, okay? He's not the blue-eyed devil. He's guiding your career. I'm sorry, I think Danny Jacobs loses a lot and when he says things like that because it's off base.
Absolutely. Yeah, the race card in boxing is a tricky thing. Particularly with Jacobs being an African American. You know, we've had plenty of African American stars in boxing, and we still do today. Mike Tyson's still a huge draw anywhere he goes. You saw the reception when Muhammad Ali died. Everybody respects him. With Danny Jacobs, he's not fighting often.
Yeah, I think it's an activity.
First things first.
And
he's not fighting
inconsistency.
often. Exactly. And
that's he has to look at his
That's
promoter
on him.
if he
That's
actually
on-
has a real
that's on
promoter
them.
or his
Yeah.
advisor. Here's the thing. He beat Peter Quillen in a fight that was well received, that was watched, that sold tickets
In
at
December.
Barclays in December, right? So then he sits out. He doesn't know who he's fighting for like 8 months. When he does get a fight, it's a rematch that people really weren't interested in with Sergio Mora. He's not fighting in Brooklyn. He's fighting in Reading, Pennsylvania, in a 7,000-seat venue. How do you go from there to there? And whose fault is that?
Yeah,
Is that racism?
and by the
or
way-
is that the choice of the people who were managing your career?
And once Toledo decided to turn up when Robert Easter won the title, they actually darkened the arena.
Yeah.
Okay, again, Danny needs to look inward or look at other people saying, wait a minute, this may not be on the American public here. But the question is then, Mike, do you think with that being said, while Golovkin wants Jacobs, do you think Jacobs needs Golovkin if he wants to be that superstar?
absolutely. I mean, how else are you going to go about it? There's only one guy to beat at middleweight.
Yeah.
And that's Gennady Golovkin. Sure, if Golovkin-Jacobs happens, that's definitely Golovkin's toughest opponent to date, correct?
Yeah, it'll be
Full-fledged
interesting.
middleweight, power, speed. He's been knocked out before, sure, but I mean, he's still the best out there other than Golovkin.
It's why you fight the fight. So again, the WBA has clearly stated 30-day negotiating window. And then we might go to a purse bid. And then I don't even want to get into it. All right, well, that's it for this edition of 10 Count. On behalf of Michael Baca and Doug Fischer, this is Steve Kim saying till the next round, goodbye, everybody.